In this video, I want to take a closer look at one of my favorite pre-choruses in K-pop, the one in BoA's Temptations. Produced by Moonshine, this pre-chorus uses some common tricks and a not so common mass of secondary dominant chords to prepare the chorus. But before we get ahead of ourselves, a pre-chorus is usually experienced in the context of an entire song. So let's do a quick overview of what is going on in the rest of Temptations. Bass and high plucks build the chord progression that loops throughout verses and chorus. They are introduced in the intro. Temptations is in the key of F minor. Our chords are pretty much F minor, A flat, D flat, C for the verses and chorus. A simple progression that starts on our tonic or home chord F minor and loops back around through the dominant chord. A quick word on the dominant function. If we look at a chord function, the tonic, F minor in this case, is the chord where we feel at home and at rest. From there we can step onto the road, walk a bit around and explore with other chords. But once we hit the dominant chord, C major in this case, we feel a very strong pull back home, to tonic. Let's look at the dominant chord first in the key of F major. A simple dominant chord is based on the 5th scale degree, so C in this case. Then we can simply build a chord with a 3rd and a 5th above that note from the F major scale. So overall we get a C major chord. The 3rd of this chord is the 7th or the leading tone of the scale, so it has a strong pull up to the tonic note. A leading tone alone gives a strong sense of tension that wants to be resolved. Anchored on the 5th of the scale, we feel a strong resolution when coming back to the tonic chord, here F major. The same applies in F minor, only that if we were to pick our 3rd for the C chord from our F minor scale, we would get a C minor chord without that juicy leading tone. So for a true dominant function and a stronger resolution, the 3rd is raised to again form a C major chord. To make a dominant chord even stronger, a minor 7th can be added. It forms a tritone against the major 3rd and strongly points towards a resolution downwards to the 3rd of the tonic chord. This effect of tension and resolution is so strong that one can easily build a dominant chord that leads to a chord other than the tonic. One example is the dominant of the dominant, or double dominant, so a chord that strongly points towards the dominant chord of a key. For example, in F minor, the dominant chord is C major. The dominant chord of C major is G major. Okay, back to Temptations. With the verses and chorus having the same chord progression, the pre-chorus is our chance to harmonically step away a bit further from home for a moment, to give us a breather and prepare a satisfying return to known material. And boy, do Moonshine do just that. The pre-chorus is a massive build-up to the chorus for several reasons. Obviously, the percussion plays a big part, starting with claps on every beat, adding in a kick, then faster subdivision, giving a lot of drive, especially in conjunction with the main rhythm going on that hits on 3 and. We also get a filter opening up, meaning we start with a more muffled sound and then get more and more sonic material. Especially the high fast arpeggios are almost inaudible in the beginning and get more to the front as we go on. This rising effect of perceived sound also helps in building energy. Another song example of a very audible sweeping filter is the Peekaboo Bridge. This increase in pitch is backed up by the main plucks we hear as a rising melody. It starts on F4 and ends on a high C6, hitting some notes that are out of key on the way up. Again, the rising melody means we get higher and higher pitches, giving us more and more excitement. But this melody is just a part of something a lot bigger going on. A strong series of chords, a progression that pulls us to every new measure and increases in intensity. We start on tonic, F minor. Then we get a C major chord, so our normal dominant function, and it leads us back to F minor, so we start out strongly grounded. Next up is E flat major, or the dominant parallel, also known as flat 7. This chord is diatonic in F minor, so it is not all that exciting on its own, but remember the secondary dominants? E flat can also be seen as the dominant chord of A flat, here the tonic parallel function, or flat 3, and that is exactly where we are going in the song. So one could look at the two chords as a mini cadence with secondary dominant to tonic parallel. Thus we arguably get our first secondary dominant of the song. While E flat and A flat are diatonic and thus very normal chords in F minor, next we get a G major chord. With the B natural clearly out of the key, we feel a strong pull to resolve to C. So G major is our dominant of the dominant, or double dominant. And one could expect to resolve to a C dominant and then back to F minor, aka tonic, aka home, from there. Instead, we land on C minor, which has no real pull to tonic. We do not return home, but get another secondary dominant, B flat, strongly pointing us towards E flat. This time, the resolution comes in the form of an E flat minor chord, a little surprise harmonically, and it means that the melodic line can continue chromatically, so in half steps, as the next chord is E flat major again, the secondary dominant we already know from earlier, but this time with an added 7th, which makes the dominant function very clear and spices things up a bit more. Also, maybe this is the right time to note that chords do not have to be in root position. Root position meaning that the note the chord is functionally built on is also the lowest. Here, the 7th from the E flat 7 chord has been put in the bass. Since that 7th note strongly wants to resolve down, the next chord, A flat, is put in first inversion, the 3rd in the bass. And this is where things really take off. The next chord is yet another secondary dominant, here with the 7th in the bass, this time leading to B flat major in first inversion, so basically the dominant of our subdominant function. But Moonshine probably looked at a simple F over E flat chord and thought, let's spice things up a bit. To make a dominant chord even stronger than with just a 7th, a flat 9 can be added. The flat 9 strongly points down, so we now have 3 notes in our chord that pull us in a certain direction. In the case of an F7 flat 9 chord, the 3rd, A, leads up to B flat. The 7th, E flat, points down towards D or D flat. The flat 9, G flat, wants to resolve to an F. When building this kind of chord, the root, F in this case, is not even necessary anymore. It is often omitted. I'm actually unsure whether this is the case here, but I just notated it as being left out. That is also done in common practice voice leading where only 4 voices are available. What we get is a really cool chord that opens the door wide for all sorts of cool music theory stuff, but in this case we go the simplest route by heading to the expected B flat chord, our subdominant chord, here in major. Next up is our trusty double dominant, which we looked at towards the beginning of this video. And how convenient, it is basically the same chord as our earlier example, a G dominant leading to C. But Moonshine probably looked at this chord and thought, well, that last dominant chord surely was spicy, but how about more spice? Well, the first step is to add the 7th, then the flat 9th. The root can be omitted again. This is similar to our previous chord. But look at that 5th, it's basically doing nothing. The 3rd, 7th and flat 9th are doing all the work, clearly pushing us in a direction, and the 5th is kinda undecided. Well, easy solution. Just lower the fifth by a half step. Now every single note in this chord is dissonant or unstable and pulling us towards a resolution. The third goes up, the flat 5, flat 7 and flat 9 all move down. To really get that double dominant feeling going, we can even put the flat 5 into the bass. That way the bass will arrive on the root of the dominant chord in the next measure. We now move towards a C dominant chord, but there is one problem remaining. With both the flat 9 and the flat 5 clearly leading down, we will inevitably get what is called parallel fifths. Two voices moving at the same time remaining a perfect fifth away from each other. That is usually frowned upon in common practice voice leading. But Moonshine were attentive during theory class, it seems, and they have one last trick to pull. Instead of immediately resolving our double dominant to our dominant C and risking hate from the classical community for parallel fifths, they put a 6/4 suspension on the dominant, which can then later resolve to the normal C dominant chord. Of course, parallel fifths are of no great concern in a production like this. I personally am unable to clearly hear any of the chord voicings. There could be a parallel fifth in there, and no one really cares. But still, to bring that dominant with 6/4 suspension before the actual dominant chord is a really nice touch that adds to the classical feeling of the entire pre-chorus. I wonder if it was a conscious decision based on music theory, or if Moonshine simply felt like it sounded good that way. I guess now is the time to take a step back and get an overview of the pre-chorus harmony, and also to look at the voicings. The principle is clear. We get some chord on the first beat of each measure, then some secondary dominant on the 3 and, later on 3, which then leads to the next chord. The most audible instrument is our rising pizzicato line that really drives home the increasing energy of the whole thing. At first, the melody sits at the fifth of each secondary dominant, so without very much power, and the dominant chords used are not very strong, without sevenths, without inversions, leading to quite normal chords within the key. We may feel pleasantly surprised by each new dominant resolution cycle, but there is no clear direction yet, and the principle is quickly obvious. Then we start using more and more notes that are out of the F minor key. Our chords get ever more spicy, and finally the plucks start playing the third of each dominant function, so the leading tone up, meaning that at the second half of the pre-chorus we feel like there is no return. We get pulled to every new chord, with the melody rising in half steps as we get the nastiest dominant functions known to 4-part common practice voice leading noobs like me, all backed up by the intensifying percussion and production techniques like sweeping filters. The bass movement is also really satisfying, jumping larger intervals at first, but moving down chromatically at the end. And when we finally hit our true dominant and then go back to tonic for the chorus, we feel like we really earned that arrival. And if you managed to stick throughout this entire video, you have definitely earned that arrival, which is why without further commentary I'm going to play the entire pre-chorus one last time.